Hello everybody, I'm Rusty. I want to welcome you to Island Breeze Tropicals. So today we're going to be talking about pupping and when is it right to separate pups from your bromeliads. There's more than one answer, as usual. So you know what? The sun is shining, the island breeze is blowing. It's time that you and I got growing. Come on, let's have some fun. And why don't we take a look and find out when's the right time to separate pups on your bromeliad? So, okay guys, why don't we start out with a question. When is the right time to separate a pup from your bromeliad? Well, it's pretty easy. There are exceptions to every rule. If you know me, you know I've got them, and I'm going to tell you what they are. But for the most part, it has to do with size. And what I'm going to do is I'll show you some close-ups after I show you some plants. Now this is Ampulacea. This is its adult size. It's what I term as being a midi. So I'm going to show you the size of the pups on here, and we're going to try and figure out which ones to take off and which ones to leave. Now this is a Neoregelia. See that nice red color in there? That comes from one of the parents called Compacta, and the other is Olens. As you can see, it's stoloniferous. See the stolons on there? So I like this one. You know how much I love stolies. So I'm going to show you a close-up of the pups, and let's see which ones we can take off of this and which ones we ought to leave. So okay, are there any hard and fast rules? Basically it has to do with size. If the pup is really, really small, it will have to fend on its own. Remember that all of these pups that you see on this plant right here are attached to the parent plant, and as such are deriving carbohydrate that the parent plant is making using photosynthesis in the leaves, right? So remember, they're autotrophs, they make their own food. Okay guys, all rules have exceptions. I'm going to show you what one is in just a little bit, but in general, let's keep in mind that all of these leaves are solar collectors. They're meant to capture sunlight, and using that and water and carbon dioxide and the chlorophyll in the leaf, this plant makes its own food. Okay, so why is that important when we want to know what pups to take off? Well, here's the deal. If you take a look, and I'm going to lean over and you can see all of these pups on here, and I'm going to turn the plant around and you can see the pups. Take a look. All of these are connected. All of them are part of what I would term as being a guild system. So the larger plants are also providing carbohydrate for the smaller plants. So what happens if you remove a pup that's really, really small? Well, now that pup has got to do everything on its own. It has to make roots, it has to make new leaves, it has to function on its own. It left home. If you leave the pup on the plant, it will derive carbohydrate from the larger pups. So if you leave a pup connected to the parent plant, that parent plant is going to be providing carbohydrate for the pup to grow. When we separate that pup, then it's going to have to fend on its own. Okay, so all of these leaves are solar collectors, right? So what happens with a smaller pup? Well, it doesn't have the leaf surface area that the larger plant does, and when you separate it now, it's got to use a much smaller leaf surface area in order to capture sunlight, and it has to do that in order to grow roots and grow new leaves. Now, is the plant going to die? Probably not, but it will grow much slower. Okay, so what's going to happen when we separate a pup and it's a little small? Well, remember, it needs energy in order to grow, and it has to make its own energy. It makes its own food. Well, if its leaves are smaller, like, let's see if I can show you this one. They're smaller like that, then it's going to take it a lot longer to grow. It needs the energy to grow. It has to provide its own energy. So in general, we should leave that pup on that plant so that it will get bigger, and using the energy that it gets from the rest of the plant, it will get bigger faster, and then we can separate it and then we can plant it out. All right, why don't we take a closer look at this Olin's Compacta cross, and I think you can get an idea for the size of the rosette. So that's the adult size. I would call this a midi, not a mini, and certainly not a large Neoregelia. So we're going to come on over here, and I'm going to show you this pup. And as you can see, the pup is a little bit smaller, but this pup is the right size to separate. And I'm going to bring it up here like this. Maybe you can see the size of the pup. Oops. And I'm going to bring it over here, and you can get an idea for the size of the pup. So a good rule of thumb, what I use is anything from 1/3 to 1/2 the size of the adult, and you're good to go. And that has enough leaf surface area that it will be able to grow new leaves and grow roots. Really won't skip a beat. It'll do just fine. Plus, this has some stored carbohydrate in there to give it a hand. Okay, so now take a look at this pup here, and you can see that this is the pup right here. And take a look. Let's see if I can get around here and get some kind of angle on it so that you can see in perspective. See the adult in back of it, and take a look at the size of the pup. Okay, so there's no hard and fast rule. We're not going to be going in here with calipers and measuring devices, but I think you can see that that is pretty small. So what we want to do is we want to leave that pup on there long enough that it can get bigger, and it will be utilizing the carbohydrate produced by the parent plant that it's coming out of. And then when it gets to be the size of the other pups that I showed you, then we're good to go. Now this is a close-up of Ampulacea. You can see that it's got damage in it too. Pretty much everything here at the tangle has been damaged in one way or another, but as long as we have these leaves, we're going to be okay, and it will make carbohydrate and grow new plants. Okay, so why don't we take a look? Look at these pups that are growing out. By the way, this is a stoloniferous Bromeliad as well. Now I chose these so that you could see the pups separated by the stolon from the adult, so you could get an idea as to size. I didn't choose any clumping pupping plants because you wouldn't be able to get a good idea as to the size of the pup. But let's take a look at this guy. This pup is actually way too small. Even though this is a mini Bromeliad, and that's the size of the adult, take a look at that pup, and that pup is a little small. Now again, it's not going to die if you separate it, but boy, it's just going to take such an awfully long time to grow into an adult plant. Here's another example, and you can see this pup is way too small as well. It is really not big enough to separate because it only has, how many leaves does it have? I'm only counting 3 right here, and that's not nearly enough for it to grow with any speed at all once it's separated. So I have another example of the size of the pups, and I think this is going to be really, really helpful. If you take a look at this pup right here, clearly this is going to be too small. This one right here, let me see if I can get this into the frame, and this one about the same. So you can see the size of the adult plant. By the way, you can see that it's going into senescence. I did trim this on purpose to get some of the dead leaves off of it. You can see it's pretty beaten up, and that was again by the past hurricane. So take a look at this pup right here. Let me see if I can get that in there. Here we go. And you can see that this pup is right at a great size, and that can be removed. Now, even though this plant is going into senescence, I would still leave these two smaller pups on there, this one and this one, and they will still derive carbohydrate from the senescing adult plant. And when the adult finally does decline and die, then you can let those pups go on their own and they'll do just fine. So here's an example of another Neoregelia that's pupping. Let me see if I can get that up there, and you can see those pups there. This is kind of an either-or situation. I still think these are a little small. They will still grow, but it would be helpful if these plants were left on the adult. As you can see, this is starting to decline a little bit, but take a look at all of the leaves on there, and that's showing me that it's still making a lot of carbohydrate for these pups that you see right there. So I would leave these on. Now look, there's no hard and fast rule, and like I said before, you don't have to go out there with calipers and measure them. It really is rule of thumb, and there's going to be some gray area, and there's going to be some black and white, and I think we're all going to know that. So, like I promised, here's an exception to the rule when it comes to size, determining what pup we're going to take off of an adult plant. And that is when we are going to be pupping plants in the genus Alcantarius. Specifically, this is an Imperialis, and they pup earlier in their life. And that is going to determine when we take those pups off. So we're going to have a video probably in the next few weeks, not only about this really cool genus of plants, Alcantaria, but we're also going to have a little tutorial on how to separate the pups, because they are different than a lot of the other genera. So anyway, guys, that's it. I hope that you enjoyed learning about the proper size that the pups need to be in order to separate from your Bromeliads. So no matter where you are, I hope your sun is shining. I hope you have an island breeze blowing. I know that you need to keep growing, have lots of fun. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.